thrilled to introduce this gentleman as our guest, Vada Pinson III, the son of longtime Major League player Vada Pinson. And I guess the first question I have for you is, at what age did you realize that your dad's job was something special? It wasn't like other dads.
I I guess it was when, it was when 1971. I remember 1971. My dad was playing with the Indians, and I had been down to the Reds locker room, many a times, but that was the first time that I really realized that, okay, we walk into the locker room. You have Greg Nettles. You have and one of the most oddest things was like Sam McDowell was like he's a huge guy, and had this face that I was so afraid of it as a child at the time. And it just seemed like at that point, you know, when we walked in there, everybody said, "Hey, baby, what's going on? What's going on, baby? What you gonna do today, baby?" It was like walking into a little league locker room. You know what I mean? And and God, guys gave my dad respect. And
Yeah.
I think that's what they were looking for from him. And they kept him for 2 years.
Yeah.
And actually I had fun because I got they had banners for me when I went down there, and all the players were really friendly. Like Chuck Hinton, I remember Chuck Hinton, one guy, I think he recently passed away, was really friendly to me, and I just enjoyed the Cleveland atmosphere. It was a great time. It's when
I'm
they
going
were
to
the
read through. I'm going to read through your dad's some of the highlights of his career
okay.
because we have some younger people that follow this page, and this is part of what we're doing is introducing him to a younger generation. Your dad played from 1958 to 1975 for the
Yes.
Cincinnati Reds, St. Louis Cardinals, Cleveland Indians, California Angels, and then wrapped up his career with the Royals. Had 2,757 hits, 485 doubles, 127 triples, 256 home runs, 1,169 RBI, 305 stolen bases, 286 lifetime batting average. He was a four-time All-Star, won the Gold Glove once, finished third in the National League MVP voting in 1961, and his first major league hit was off future Hall of Famer Robin Roberts. And I bet you have all of those statistics memorized.
Well, probably, yeah, yeah. It's like, and at first when you hear those numbers, and then one of my friends said, "Hey, he's more of a baseball fan than I am," and he said, go and compare your father's numbers to the Hall of Famers that are already in there." And and he asked me, "What did your father do to not be in the Hall of Fame?" I was like, "I don't know," you know, and
Well, I think that probably the biggest thing was that he, other than the brief time he was with the Angels,
yeah,
he never played in a major market city. And so, his
yeah.
career was kind of under the radar. Would you agree with that?
I would, but one of the things, Cincinnati, the Reds were like the number one baseball team,
Yeah.
and I wish, you know, when everybody talks about my dad, I said for his career to show his career, you need to look and start from 1959 all the way up to the late 60s. And
Yeah.
if you see what he did during that time frame, I feel like he did enough, to be in the Hall of Fame. If you look at, he was third in hits from the 1959 to, I'm forgetting the time frame, but Roberto Clemente and I think only Hank Aaron were ahead of my father at that time.
Yeah. So, in looking through the stats, I would describe your dad as a complete ball player. He was what they refer to as the five tool guy. Even though he won just the one gold glove, he was facing some pretty stiff competition for gold gloves in the National League. Could probably have won more than that. He truly was a complete ball player.
Yeah. You look at the players he was playing against. I'm actually lucky. He's actually lucky he got the one gold glove. You had Willie Mays, you had Hank
Hmm.
Aaron, you had Roberto Clemente, you had Kurt Flood. Uh, uh, just a couple of those names, and you look at their seasons that they had during that time frame. All of them were awesome.
Yeah. Of course, the bulk of his career with the Reds, the best years were there, and then he was elected to the Reds Hall of Fame in 1977. Do you remember much about when that happened?
Yeah, I remember, my dad. I actually even got a picture of him when he was actually on the field when they did it for him, and you know, you kind of knew that portion was going to happen. That yeah, you had to. When you look at the records that he held with the Reds, and he held it for a long time, played 11 seasons with them. So he was really happy with that. And I think that then he got into the Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame here in California, and then with the team he played with in the minor leagues, they put him in the Hall of Fame there also. So if if we get him to the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, that would be the last one. That's all he needs to complete the plaque. If you see, I built like a little collage on Facebook where they had just his face there, waiting for that Hall of Fame plaque to be there. That would be nice.
I want to talk a minute or two about Frank Robinson. I know your dad had a great friendship with Frank. They played together for a long time. And, I guess to a certain degree, your dad kind of played in the shadow of Frank Robinson, a guy who is one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Another guy that kind of gets overlooked. When you talk about the greats, Frank gets left out of that. But comment on how close their friendship was. And it went back a while, right?
Yeah, you have to remember, my dad and Frank Robinson, Kurt Flood, they all went to the same high school, even with Bill Russell. They all played behind this one coach here in George Poles in California. He was like their guiding light to get them to the major leagues. And those guys loved him. And my dad and Frank, wow. If I'd have to be on for like a couple of hours to tell you the stories because my mother, and Frank's wife and all the wives used to stick together. And I'm righteous to sit down like on the holidays and listen to my mother speak about the players. Say they would come in and and she said Pete Rose. Yeah, I think he's. My mother always say she thought Pete Rose was a black man. Because he got along so well with my dad and Frank. My dad and Frank loved him. You I remember my dad and Frank when they were when they started playing with the Angels. He said, you know what? He said, and they were just I think they were talking like kids because I was just sitting there and we were watching the game. And he said, he's the kind of guy you want on all of your teams. You know what I mean? Because he was a great hustle guy. You know what I mean? And he was like a 10. If you were gonna have a baseball player, you want a 10, and he would be that 10. That's interesting.
I want to ask you a non-baseball thing about your dad. I've read in a couple of different sources that he was quite a musician as a young man, and I was just curious, was music something that continued to be an interest throughout his life or not?
Yeah. Oh wow! If you go on my Facebook, you'll see the trumpet. He had a custom-made trumpet made, right? I have it. I have it in my living room, and it's pretty funny. Just to listen to mother used to say, "There's something," because he used to play it in the house a lot when we were younger, and he loved it. And he was with the band at McClymonds High School at first, and then I think that when George Poles actually saw my father run, and my father, my dad, I think what happened, my grandfather, Vada Senior, I say, try and play it, because I remember there was a discussion like one Christmas we were sitting around when they were talking about him trying to play baseball. And he actually, wow, I have a picture of him in a little league uniform and on Facebook, and you look at him, he looks exactly the same, and he's just a little bit thinner. And when he got to playing, George Pope said, "Oh, you need to put the trumpet down right now. You're not going to be playing the music, but playing baseball." And he had a really successful high school career too. Because with
So
Frank
maybe
Robinson,
the world missed out on a great musician, but we got a great ball player.
yeah. Because but if you see this trumpet, I was like, wow, what am I going to do with this trumpet when I pass away? Because it's like a Louis Armstrong trumpet, right? Where
Yeah.
he had it specially made, and it just, I kept it. It looks really beautiful. You know what I mean? And
Wow.
I used to play the trumpet too, but I don't think I was good as my dad because my dad could hit some really serious good notes on it.
Uh, I'm located here in Southern Illinois, and we're Cardinal fans in this part of the state.
Mhm.
So I want to talk about 1969. Your dad gets traded to the Cardinals. He's part of an outfield with Lou Brock, Kurt Flood. There was a lot of excitement. There's a lot of anticipation going into that 1969 season. I can recall seeing a Sporting News cover in spring training, I think that year, that had those three guys on the front of it. Unfortunately, your dad had injuries that year, and it's always bothered me that the Cardinals didn't give him a chance to play more than one season here. I don't think that St.
Yeah.
Louis fans got to see a healthy Vada Pinson.
Yeah, I remember when we, and I think it was time for my dad to leave because he was so excited. I remember he was so excited to be playing with Kurt again. It's like wow. He's like, oh man, I remember he was ready. My dad was ready to go at that point. We picked up, and I think that that leg injury really hurt him. I and when I look at his stats from that time frame, it's like wow, that was one of his lowest times.
Yeah,
The stats that he put up was one. I would say it's actually his lowest because they just didn't give him a chance because when he went to Cleveland that very next year, he picked it back up.
yeah.
But then he kind of fell back down that next year, and that what led him to get traded to the Angels.
I want to take a look at some baseball cards. I pulled out three cards in particular, and we're
Mhm.
talking about the 1969 season. Unfortunately, the 1969 card, we don't have him in the Cardinal uniform because this came out early in the season, and we've got him still in the Cincinnati uniform. That still bothers me all these years later that we never got a Topps baseball card with your dad in a Cardinal uniform.
Yeah, isn't that something? I think they were trying to get away with just seeing the red and white, and everybody would think that. But me and you know, hey, that's a Reds uniform.
Now, this is one of my favorite cards of your dad, the 1971 Topps. There are a lot of great action shots in that 71 set. I really like this one as you see him sliding into home. I think that's actually Thurman Munson as the catcher for the Yankees in this card. And then probably my favorite is the last card of your dad's, the 76 Topps with the Royals. I've always loved this card. 76 Topps are my favorite cards. But what I love about this, and actually, when you look at a lot of your dad's cards, you see the joy and the exuberance and the love that he had for the game. And it really comes across in these baseball cards. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The one Indian card that showed up with Thurman Munson, I call that my dad's brawl card. That was yeah, I call that the brawl card because you don't know what happened right after that. You don't really that was my father's only fight in the Major League Baseball.
So did he and Munson get into it after
Yeah,
this?
well, I no. Well, Munson tried to hold my dad back, and I forgot who the pitcher was for the Yankees, but my dad actually decked him, and they got a good picture of my dad throwing a punch in the guy. And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I was like, and he said, and my mom. I remember my mom saying, "Beta, what are you doing?" She said, "Well, he said something." I remember my dad saying he had said something and flipped the ball at him. So as a
So
totally different period.
that's the before shot. Topps didn't do the after shot of the brawl, I guess. Uh, After your dad's playing career, he went on to coach. He coached for the Mariners, the White Sox, the Tigers, and the Marlins. And what I find interesting is that two of those teams, the Mariners and the Marlins, he was a coach in their inaugural season. And to me, that says a lot about your dad and how he was respected in the game, that he would be a coach for two teams in their very first season.
Yeah, that was big for him. A lot of the coaches that he played for, well, not played for, but like Sparky Anderson, is one of the guys that stated that your dad is way overlooked. You know what I mean? I had read something, just a while back, but it's been a while since I read it, and you know, my dad's coaching career was wow. One of the things I know that my father really wanted was to be a manager, and I felt like when I look at him in his Marlins uniform, he looks just like a manager to me, I was like, he's kind of getting a little bit heavier, because he used to love this KFC, but you can kind of tell that, he started, but when you look at, when I see him in his Seattle Mariner uniform, he looks like he could still play,
Well, I got
and
to tell you that KFC will catch up to all of us at some point. I'm the same way. Well, you answered my next question because I wondered if he had ever discussed wanting to be a manager. So that was something definitely he would have loved to have had the opportunity to do that.
yeah, that's it. If he had the opportunity, he would have took it, and I think he would have, because my dad had a lot of great baseball knowledge, and that's something he wanted. But the times were are different now. I think he would have had a better shot now if he was still alive
Yes.
with us, but it never happened for him. But I don't think my father was never bitter about it. But I used to like my dad used to wear his baseball uniform. When you saw my dad in his baseball, it was like it was in a suit because he used to shine his shoes and everything too, even before the games. And I was like, wow, he just was very professional at baseball, and that all comes from his early start with George Polzon. Said, always be a professional when you get out on the field. Do what you got to do. Let your be an athlete, a professional athlete at all times.
Veda, there's some guys that you look at them in a uniform, and you say, that's what a Major League Baseball player looks like. I would consider your dad one of those guys. You look at him in these photos and these baseball cards, it's like, yeah, this dude's a Major League Baseball player. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, he loved to play baseball. It's like, when you think about it, I think that when his last year with the Marlins was like, I don't know if that was like a kind of an icebreaker because I didn't know my father was really sick at that point, but he baseball was he lived and loved baseball, you know what I mean? And he liked to help kids, and if you see a lot of the players, some of the players that are even in the game today, come on my Facebook page and tell me, all the things your father used to teach me how to do this, your father used to teach me how to do this, and he got me another year that they got me a lot of money. I was like, oh hey, that's good for you. You know what I mean?
Well, it's got to make you proud of him, outside of the stats, knowing how he loved the game
Yeah.
and how he gave back to the game in that way by helping young players. And that has to be a source of pride for you.
Yeah, yeah. It is. One of the things that I think that really keeps me going is like my dad's fans. If you see my dad's fans, I have over 14,000 followers on Facebook, and you can only have 5,000 friends on Facebook. So I told him I wasn't creating another page. That's too much work. And but I said just follow me. I try and post once in the morning, once in the evening. I try to break it up. Just to bring up his stats and everything, and a lot of the guys that are older, like, one of the young ladies actually, I call her and she wanted to speak with me. And she said, do you know, I saw your father's very first baseball game, right? And I said, you're what? Yeah. And I said, well, go look on Facebook. Look what I put on Facebook. And I put the ticket on the ticket from 19.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh my God, I was just, I was like, and it was fun. It was nice
Wow.
to have her be able to go back in time.
Yeah.
She says, I remember him. He looked so clean in his uniform and everything. And, it just kind of like blew me away. You know what I mean? So a lot of great memories for the older generation.
Sure. We've talked about your dad as a player. What would you want everyone to know about your dad as a person?
Wow. As a person, my dad was very, very respectful of people. And my dad was very shy at the very beginning. And once you got to know him, and he was, he did, he wasn't that guy that was overconfident. You know what I mean? Not, but I would say he was just really shy, and he tried to play the game the best that he could. And the people that he's treated everyone with respect. He has a lot of friends. Even I we have fans of his that when he was playing minor league ball are still they still think of my father today. You know what I mean? Even when he wasn't even in the majors. And they say your father was always polite. He was a gentleman, and just to see him, dressed and everything. I have a lot of I on Facebook, you'll see I have a lot of pictures of my father just in his civilian clothes. Well, and my father used to love. He was that professional guy that would love to wear suits, and he was very clean cut. And and I think you only see a couple of shots with my father with his mustache, and the only reason he used to wear that mustache was because when he was wearing the mustache with the Tigers, I think it was. I was in the military, and he saw I sent him a picture of me with my mustache on, and then I think he was just trying to compare us with mustaches. So yeah, it was interesting. But my dad he was a really nice guy, you know what I mean? And I think that that I miss about him personally is that you know just him trying to show me things other than baseball. I remember one time a quick story. My one of my friends came over to the house, right? and he forgot his baseball glove. And I remember I said, here, you can have my glove. And then I'm going to ask my dad if I could use the gold glove because the gold glove was down in our living room, right? So I said, hey, mom, do you think dad will mind if I use the gold glove? I'm going to play, I'm just going to take it off and we're just going to play catch for a couple of hours, right? And all I remember was that my mom, I said, hey, Veda, because my mom used to call my dad used to call my mom Jackie. Her name was Jackie. And he said, what did Manny say? Because they used to call me Manny instead of Veda because both of us were in the house. And all I remember was this big thundering noise coming down the stairs. They're like, Manny, come here. And he said, and I remember he got upset with me. And I remember my mom saying he doesn't understand the value of that gold glove. And she said, you need to sit him down. And I remember when he sat me down, he told me, you know what, this is when you grow up, you'll learn. He said, don't ever do it again. And I never did. And when I learned about it, I was like, wow, look at how many people have a gold glove. And it was funny because I remember when he sat me down, he said, this is something I really worked hard for. And, when I look at it, I say, wow, uh, you know, um, in center field. And during the time frame that he got it, 1961,
Yeah.
343 batting average. And, it was
Yep.
incredible. That was an amazing year for him.
Well, our guest has been Vada Pinson III. We've been talking about his dad, and I want to commend you for what you've been doing and keeping your dad's memory alive. And I know that you love to see your dad get into the Hall of Fame. What can we do to support your effort? What can we do to help spread the word?
Well, I asked a lot of people that who review my views basically, share my posts. You can share all of my posts and everything, and tell them just not to go off, just not to go off of the stats. Go back and look at everything from 1959 to 50, and even write the Hall of Fame. I have an address on my Facebook page where I have them writing. I have a lot of customers who, fans of my dad's who send me letters and used to see the letters that they write.
Hmm.
Because just it's hard to believe that he's not in there. And I know I'm going to get ready to, I guess, to watch the game. The All-Star game's on right now, I think.
Yeah, yep, yeah. We're recording on Tuesday night. The game just got started a few minutes ago. So, well, I want to thank you for your time, and again, thank you for what you're doing. As I said earlier, there are people who will be viewing this that certainly remember your dad, but it's equally important for our younger viewers to understand that your dad was a heck of a ball player, was one of the best of his generation, in a field of some of the greats of all time. He certainly held his own, and support your effort to try to get into the Hall of Fame. And we hope to see that happen someday.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.